Hello to the Azure Under the Hood series of webinars. My name is Robert Turnšek. I'm an IT architect at NIL, and we prepared for you another webinar where we will discuss Azure basics, so about Azure Compute, so infrastructure as a service, and we will touch a little bit about Azure Network and Azure Storage, and how you start with Azure, so where you get all the information, what is the starting point. We'll talk about subscriptions and this kind of stuff. So you maybe ask yourself, why would you use the Azure as your infrastructure? There are several use cases which might be appealing for your use. So the first one I would say is the data center extension. So for example, you want to deploy some new stuff and your IT tells you, come back in 6 months or a year, we have to upgrade our servers, our storage, whatever in the data center, and don't have enough resources. So with using the Azure, you can do this in few minutes. So have your virtual machines power on in few minutes. Another part is, let's say, you wanted to boost your sales and your presence, and you're creating a new website, and you want to have this website, let's say, globally. You have your existing website in your premises and your lines are not fast enough or you don't have enough redundancy. So you put your web on the Azure. So you do the DMZ. So you create a DMZ in the Azure and you're immediately available globally. Another good part here is that you pay for what you use. For example, during the night when you have a low load, you only have one virtual machine for your website, but then in the morning when you expect a peak, automatically additional virtual machines are created and you can then handle the additional load. Another good example is you want to upgrade your on-prem environment, and according, let's say, to your internal procedures, you have to do the testing before the environment, which is always good. So either you have enough resources in-house to do the tests, or you just copy your virtual machines to the Azure, run them, upgrade them, write down the procedure, see if everything's okay. So when you find the correct steps, then you just repeat the correct steps on your on-prem environment, and usually it will go a lot more smoothly than if you just, close your eyes and start the upgrade on-prem on your production. These are, let's say, typical 3 commonly used scenarios. Agenda for today is basics about the Azure. So for you who were already seeing the Azure, you know that the Microsoft changed the look and feel of the portal. So we'll go a little bit to the old and new portal and show you the differences. Microsoft is depreciating the old portal, so it's still there. Some features are only working in old portal, and that's the reason why we are still mentioning it. But they are moving almost all the features already to the new portal. Then we will show you how you create virtual machine. There are several ways of creating virtual machines. So the most used, or let's say for this kind of demos or initial, is using your web browser. But you can also use PowerShell, and the Microsoft also creates the thing called Azure Cli. For those who love, let's say, command prompt, or they are used to Unix shells, this is one of the useful options. Then we will also go deep down into what you have to take care when you deploy the virtual machines in Azure, because if you know a little bit of history, the beginnings of Azure was in the platform as a service, not infrastructure as a service. And the infrastructure as a service is working very well right now, so they're up to speed with other cloud providers. But you have to be aware that if you need the contract backed by SLA, there is no SLA for single VMs. So that's the reason why we will deep dive a little bit into the fault domains, availability sets, and the SLAs. One of the things where I will show you how, let's say, if you have existing Microsoft Hyper-V environment, or even the VMware environment, or let's say VMware vSphere or VMware Workstation, how you move your existing cloud to the Azure. You will see it's quite easy. It's not complicated. So you just prepare your virtual machine and copy the disks into the Azure. We'll go a little bit about networking basics. So how to set up the network? Do you have to do it manually? Can you leave it automatically up to Azure? And with that, we also briefly mention the express route, traffic manager, load balancer, and other network goodies you get in the Azure subscription. There are some, let's say, prerequisites which you have to have before you start working with Azure. The basic one is Azure subscription. The easiest way to, let's say, describe Azure subscription is this is basically your container, your private data center. So whatever is in the subscription can talk to each other. Whatever is outside of your subscription, if you want to have connectivity between these two subscriptions, you either open the virtual machines on the internet or you create an IPsec tunnel between the subscriptions. So two subscriptions behave like two data centers. The next things you need, let's say most heavily, at least for the beginners, is some kind of supported browser. For connecting to the virtual machines, you need RDP client, which is built-in Windows machines, and SSH client like PuTTY or any other favorite SSH client to connect to the Linux machines. Currently in Azure, there is no out-of-band connectivity, so be a little bit careful when you play with the network settings in your virtual machines. So if you change or if you delete the IP address, the access to the virtual machine will be lost. So you have to go to the portal and reset the IP settings. Another big part is PowerShell. Windows already have a PowerShell, but you have to add on the Azure PowerShell commandlets. So basically Azure and Azure RM. And another good approach is that you also add the PowerShell gallery. Then you get the install module and find module and other goodies where you can just install Azure and install Azure RM. Otherwise, you use the links which are here to install PowerShell, the Azure PowerShell. Another thing which I mentioned at the beginning is Azure CLI. So with Azure CLI, you get command line access to your Azure environment. You can do a lot of things through the browser. So almost all typically day-to-day things you can do through the browser. But some deep changes or deep settings, you have to use PowerShell. Even though you never did the PowerShell, it's a good point to start learning PowerShell. So you will need for some specifics, some fine configuration settings or configuration task, you will need PowerShell. The last part here is Microsoft Virtual Machine Converter. So this is one of the tools which you use if you wish to move, let's say, your VMware environment into the cloud, into the Azure. So that's from the slides. So now we'll go to the demo. One URL you have to remember. So Azure Microsoft.com. The start point for all the stuff you do in the Azure. So you have very good documentation portal. So there is a documentation, and since Azure is not just a computer where we will dive in today, you have all the stuff here and all the links to additional demos, additional videos, how to work with the Azure. The easiest way, if you don't have Azure or your organization doesn't have Azure through the enterprise agreement or to any other, is to sign up for free 200. You get the $200 of Azure. So what can you do with $200? Is you can power on some machines and run them for some time so that you get familiar with the Azure. Another way is that you buy Azure as part of your enterprise agreement. And if you have the Azure through enterprise agreement, then you can have multiple subscriptions. So if you remember from the beginning, you can create multiple data centers. Then you go to the portal. So the portal then asks you for the username and password. So you can have either the AD integrated username and password. So that was discussed in one of the previous webinars. Or you can use Microsoft Live ID username and password. In our case, we are using Active Directory integrated, which is integrated with NIL Active Directory. So as soon as you logged in, you are starting currently with the new portal. There is below is the Azure Classic. So you set up this dashboard by yourself. So mine is a little bit already customized. So you can also have the old portal. And depends on what you've done. You see here your I don't know, virtual machines, mobile services, whatever you have. As I mentioned, if you have an enterprise subscription, you can have multiple subscriptions like I have here. But for this demo, I will use the subscription called StoreSense. So in this subscription, the only things what I now have is the directory, which is common directory for all the new subscriptions. So that's the consequence of the integration with the Active Directory. If you don't have the integration, you will not see even that. So everything will be empty. So in the old portal, that's the way how you work in the old portal. So basically you have the categories, and if you go to virtual machine, you just do the create virtual machine and you would go through the process. I will not do it in the old portal because if you are new into the environment, I encourage you that you work through the new portal. The only things which you will do to the old portal are, let's say, for example, if you're using Store Simple, this one is still in old portal, and maybe some machine learning and this kind of stuff is in the old portal. Or, for example, the rights management, it's also in the old portal or maybe remote app. So this is current for July 2016. So let's go to the new portal. New portal is done a little bit in the way of, let's say, a shopping cart. So you can do a lot of more things already through the portal. So in the old portal, most of the stuff, let's say, detailed configuration, you have to do immediately through Powershell. So for example, again, let's say all resources. So I already have one storage account from the test I did before. So I will leave the storage account and then I will create a new one so that you see how we do it from the beginning, maybe some resource group. So the idea of the subscription is that this is your data center. So imagine that you are building the data center in the old way. So you do it from the scratch, let's say, on your prem. So the first thing before you start moving in the servers and powering up the virtual machines is that you have to set up the environment. Okay, beside the power and cooling, you have to do some kind of networking setup, and also you have to have, let's say, some kind of storage setup. So that's the same idea, which I recommend that you follow. So first, you think about how your network will be set up, how your storage will be set up, and then start creating virtual machines using these two constructs. So one of the new stuff in the new portal, which I would say it's a good one, are the resource groups. So the resource group is a construct where you can, let's say, put together the different resources. That's why it's called resource group. So you put in this resource group networking, you put different storage types, and then when you create a virtual machine, you just select a resource group, and then you just see the let's say available networking in this resource group and the available storages or other resources. So you can have multiple resource groups even in the same data center, but the resource group is tied to the data center itself. So let's create another resource group Brazil. So with subscription, so as I said, it's a logical construct. So it's successful. Every time you do something in the Azure, it's done asynchronous way. So let's say create a new virtual machine. When you fill all the data, the virtual machine will be created in the background. So you can do other stuff can create multiple virtual machines, so you don't have to wait. So for example, now you see we have two different resource groups. One of the recommendations is that you, let's say, name them according to location. So now we go back to all resources. So we have one storage already, so I'll create another one. So you can have a storage account for web or mobile, so more PaaS and SaaS, or for virtual machines. So we are today discussing about virtual machines. So again, the documentation is available. You can always have a support from the online documentation. That's the good part. So always you have to give the name, which if you looked at the here, it has to be unique. So globally unique, not just in your subscription. Inside the name, you have to select different deployment models. So I will choose Resource Manager because the Classic means I'm working in the old portal and in the old way, which let's say we'll try to avoid. So general purpose means you can store files, virtual machines, so whatever you want. Standard and premium, different pricing tier and different capabilities. So standard is typically means you have the spinning disks. Premium means you have the solid state drive, and standard is typically it's limited to the size, and the premium goes to the higher sizes. I will not mention the sizes because you see the thing I'm talking to you is it's available right here. You just follow up. If you need more details, you go to learn more. So what kind of storage you want to have? So typically the mostly used are local redundant storage and geo-redundant storage. So local redundant storage means I will have three copies of my data in the same data center. It's done in the synchronous way, so the data is consistent. Why there are three copies? The three copies are done there because the Azure or any other, let's say, these big cloud providers, they are not using shared storage. So they're using the environment which is called hyper-converged. So what does it mean? So hyper-converged means that you have a server with local storage, local disks. And then you have another server with, again, local disks. And typically, these local disks are not even in the RAID configuration. So nothing is left to the hardware. Everything is done in the software. So the software, in this case, we are talking about Microsoft Azure, so basically a Windows server, is taking care about the distribution of your data, of your information. So data is always in three copies. So that's locally redundant storage. Then you have a geo-redundant storage. It means that besides your three local copies in synchronous way, you will also get the asynchronous copy to the another data center. When we are talking about the European data centers, is if you have the primary data center Europe West, then your asynchronous copy is in the Europe North. And then there is again three copies in synchronous phase. So if you choose the GRS, which we let's say choose here, you get 6 copies of your data. So I would say it's taken care for your data better than 99% of us can do in local environment. Resource group, as mentioned, so use existing. The thing I have to change is the name. Typically, what I do for the name, I put our subscription in front, and then I give some kind of where it is. So West EU and global redundant GRS. So that's how we create the, let's say, storage. Now, so deployment started. So we can go back to all resources and we can continue working, and later on we'll get the storage account created. Another things which we will have, so we'll have some kind of networking. I will show you how you do the networking through creation of the virtual machine. So we have the two storage accounts. So one of the things which I prefer to use is that I have virtual machines then using these two storage accounts. So I'm mimicking some kind of, let's say, shared storage, but it's not a shared storage. So I have one which is locally redundant, one which is globally redundant. Maybe if this would be production, then I would create another one on the premium storage, again, locally redundant, another one on the premium storage, globally redundant. So now let's add a virtual machine. There are currently no virtual machines, you see. So again, I can go add here or new here. I get the big catalog. So I can choose a lot of different virtual machines which already have pre-installed some images. So for example, I can use I can deploy a Cisco router as a virtual machine and use this Cisco router as a gateway out of my network. So the way I would use it in the physical environment. And the things are adding here, and for example, you can create some, let's say, initial templates and also publish them here, and you can then get some money back through supporting this kind of stuff. We'll do the 2012 R2, and the deployment model, again, Resource Manager or Classic. Start using Resource Manager because the Classic is going out. So create. It asks you for some stuff which you have to type in to be able to create a virtual machine. Now the next part is the size of the virtual machines. We are already discussing this about the sizing. So you have different types of virtual machines. So they recommend you something, some machines. One of the things which I have to mention is that how the billing is done in the Azure. You are charged for the virtual machines which are running. If you have a virtual machine created there, you will always pay for the storage which you are using. In the normal storage, not premium, you are charged for the gigabytes of the used storage, not allocated. When you are moving to premium storage, so SSDs, you are charged for allocated storage. Be careful; it's a lot of difference, and that's the price you always pay. So for the storage space you are consuming. For the CPU, memory, networking, and other stuff, you are charged only when you are using the resource. So, for example, if you have test and dev, so if you plan to use the Azure for test and development, you should create some kind of scheduled task, which you can do through Azure Automation, which will, let's say, for example, shut down all the tests or let's say freeze or suspend all the tests, all the environment at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and power it on next day at 7 o'clock. So instead of paying for 24/7, you would just then start paying for what? 8-9 hours. So it's half of the price, typically. So for example, we'll use this one. So now we'll ask us where to place our virtual machine. So you can select, so if you go to the premium, we didn't create any premium storage. So it would create a new one for us. Or we say, okay, let's use our existing storage. So we'll just use it in the existing. So now the network, I didn't create the network manually because I will create it here in when I'm creating the first machine, and then I will be able to reuse the same network for other virtual machines. For the network, you have to select the IP addresses or leave it to the Azure to create it for you. So for the network, I will not use the resource group, I will use network name. Then the address space. Okay, the Azure recommends you 10/16, but I recommend you not to use the defaults because maybe in some time in the future you want to connect this to your existing on-prem environment. So take care talk to your IT, how is the addressing space done, and ask them to give you some part of your internal private networking. So what I have here, so I get 2 subnets of in the 10 address space. So for example, I will get the subnet, let's say subnet 0, and the range will be, it has to be from the one above. So I will use, let's say, smaller subnet. So it's okay. So for my new subnet 0, or maybe I will call them, I don't know, servers. I'm using the /25, which means I can have around 120 virtual machines inside. Okay, so you see this is already done. Then you have the public IP address. So each virtual machine in the Azure gets the public IP address and the test and the security group. Okay, so one thing to the security group, it's also that you look a little bit into it, because you can then reuse this security group to other, and this is some kind of, let's say, firewall rule. So for example, I will say this will be Windows servers and the inbound rules, so it means I'm allowing 338 to my Windows server and nothing else. And whenever I change this Windows server network security group, it will be applied for all servers which are using this rule. And the last part is just a summary, so that at the last time I can double check if everything is how I want it, and just say okay. Now what will happen? So initializing deployment, if I go here under all resources, you already see the public IP address was created. So that I didn't show you the details of public IP address, because you get the IP address from the Azure. They allocate you some kind of public IP address to you. So now, while we are waiting for this part to be finished, let's go a little bit into the CLI. So you will see how you can work with the CLI. So the first part is definitely the Windows PowerShell. So you type in the PowerShell in your environment. You then, as I mentioned, you then install Azure RM modules, and let's say double check which modules you have in your environment. So you can then see that Azure RM is already installed. So we can work with Azure RM. So the first part, when you start with the PowerShell, you have to log in. You first create a variable with your username and password, and then you can use this in your login attempts. Okay, so now I'm logged into the Azure Cloud environment, and I've got one of the subscriptions. If you follow the whole demo, you see that this is not the subscription we are working right now. Get Azure RM subscription. Oops. Please type. See, now I get all the subscriptions I'm allowed to see, or where I'm an administrator or I'm able to do something. So I have to now switch the subscription. So typically in the PowerShell, get gives you the different stuff, select or set, then change the stuff. So in this, let's say, short description, I'm get Azure RM subscriptions, and I'm looking for a subscription name called StoreSense, and then I select this subscription as my default subscription. So you see, so I can double check, I'm now in the StoreSense. So now you can play with the different Azure. So you could create a virtual machine, you could delete a virtual machine, you could select virtual machine, you can change the virtual machine. So whatever I was doing through the Windows, I could do also through PowerShell. it's not intended to be a PowerShell course, so it's just showing you how to log in into the PowerShell. Another GUI here is Azure CLI. You have to install it again, and then you get this kind of Azure command prompt. You always start with Azure and then the command. So help lists you all the commands. So again, you have to do the login. So you can do login either through the web browser, or you can do the login through the username and the password. And I see all the subscriptions, and again I select the one which we're using for demo now, and in this case I also have to select the mode which I'm using, so Azure Resource Management, not the classic one. Otherwise I would be working with the classic. Again, with this one you can then manipulate or create virtual machines or change them. So that's just for short intro. Okay, so let's see what's happening here. So we see we have a network security group. So we have now network interface, and we have the virtual machine. So okay, let's see what's happening here. Deployment started. So we're still waiting for the virtual machine to be deployed. So I show you how you create the virtual machine to the portal, and show you basic of working with PowerShell and with Azure CLI. So now let's talk about a little bit the full domains availability set and SLAs. So one of the things in the Azure is that virtual machine, as single virtual machine like we have here, this kind of test virtual machine, doesn't have any SLA. So Microsoft is committed that they will not lose your data. So as I said, the data is copied always in three different servers. But Microsoft does periodically maintenance, which is always done in the night. So if you are using the European data center, this will be always done usually Saturday to Sunday at 2 o'clock in the morning, your local time. So the machine is rebooted because of the underlying infrastructure has to be rebooted. For example, Hyper-V, where your virtual machine is running, is patched, and then it has to be rebooted. So that's planned maintenance. You always get the notifications quite in advance through the email, which is in part of your subscription. The second one is unplanned shutdown. So your machine is running on some Hyper-V host, and if something is wrong with this Hyper-V host, then Microsoft will lose all the virtual machines which are running on that Hyper-V host. In this case, Microsoft will start your virtual machine on another host. So it's like you would have the Windows cluster, and the one node would go down. Of course, all the loads on that node would be shut down, would crash, and the cluster would start the load on the other node. So that's approximately, you will be down for a few minutes. So if this is enough for your, let's say, normal work, in most cases I would say it is, then you can live with it. But if you want to have, let's say, higher availability, you can always create virtual machines. Let's say you can create multiple instances of same virtual machine. The challenge with this is that application running inside the virtual machine has to support it. So, for example, if you have the web server, it's not a problem. If you have a database server, I would say having two database servers, that can be a big challenge without any database availability stuff. But in that case, even in the web server or in the database, it's better to use the platform as a service or software as a service. So if you need more, so you can then deploy multiple virtual machines, and you can put the virtual machines into the different fault domain. So they will be running on the different hardware always. And you can put them into different update domain. So even when the Microsoft does the updates, the planned updates, only one update domain at the time is rebooted. So, for example, you have 3 virtual machines in 3 different update domains. 2 will be always alive, 1 will go down, it will be bring up, and so on and so on. This is basically the idea of fault domains and availability set. Another good part here is that, for example, if you can monitor the load, so you can monitor the load of the of your virtual machine, and on the predefined, let's say, when the load of my virtual machine is above some, let's say, 50 or 60%, start cloning the virtual machine to a new one. And then the new virtual machine is deployed. In front of it, you have the load balancer, and so that you get more resources instantly. And then when, let's say, load goes down, you can destroy the virtual machine. So this is done automatically by Azure itself. It doesn't set the deployment rules. The challenge of this is that when you have 2 virtual machines, you use twice of the resources, and of course you have to pay for the resources. Nothing is for free. Okay, so now you've seen the deployment was done. So if I go to all resources, virtual machine is here. For example, I can now wait for the computer name, all the stuff here. I have also the button, and the machine will be powered on. So deployment is done. Probably now the machine is booting. So the machine is booting. So I have to wait for the IP address. So you see its IP address here. So if I type it's a remote desktop. Initial setup, the first time login. So we have our new virtual machine. So for the Linux, let's create one Linux virtual machine. So new. You have also other distributions available. Again, quite simple. Let's see. So you see the server manager. If I open the command prompt, that's the machine. So I get the private IP address, but I'm connecting to public. So the Azure is doing NAT for me. So I'm using my private addressing, and in this case I selected the automatic IP addressing. So I was allocated just the IP address from my subnet, but I could also choose the static IP address. And one more thing, when you get the IP address, so this .4 will be always reserved for this machine, even though all the setting is done via DHCP. You see, okay, I'm getting the IP address from the DHCP, but I will always get the same IP address. I could now change this kind of stuff when, let's say, adding to the Active Directory on-prem if I have a tunnel between. Virtual machine size again depends on the needs I have. One more thing about the virtual machine sizes is that you can change the sizing later on. So start small, then when you see that there is not enough resources, you can add the resources or change. The procedure is that you shut down the machine and change the resources, power on the machine, and the machine will have more resources. You can do it in both ways, increase the resources or decrease the resources. So again, the storage part and and now the Linux will be also created. One of the things what we will also show you is that how you add the existing virtual disk to the environment. The first part is how you can create a virtual disk. So one of the things, if the disk is, okay, if you have the, let's say, running VM, then you will usually use Hyper-V or existing Hyper-V environment, existing VMware environment. But for example, you can also play with the disk manager and you can either create a VHD or attach a VHD. I already have one VHD, I will show you. One small one I created. So I can attach it here and mount it to my local machine here. So I see it now as a disk A. And now I have here one of the. So the idea here is that I upload this disk to Azure and attach it to our Windows server and have some kind of bulk copy. So, okay, now I've changed the file. I will detach. It's here in the temp directory. The easiest way to upload the file is using PowerShell. First, you have to see what kind of storage account. So we are already logged in. So we have the context of our demo subscription. So you see, I have two storage accounts. So one is storage account GRS, one storage account ULRS. The next part, adding add Azure RM VHD, resource group name RG West EU, destination, you select the storage account name, and then this is by default. So blob, so the name of the blob there, and the file you have as you want as a destination. Let's see if the file is not already there. So let's see all resources. It's already there, so we'll change it to VHDS. VHDS, like this. And if everything is okay, the file will be copied to the. So it's already copied because it's really small one. Intentionally using the 20 meg of the file. So if I go back to here and do the refresh, I see the file here. So now I go to the virtual machine. So we have our test virtual machine, and we have a disks here. We have to wait for disks to show, and then we'll be able to mount this disk to our Windows server. And we'll open disk management also here. There is a C drive, and then the temporary drive. So the Azure virtual machine always comes that if you select the template, you will always get the C drive where there is an operating system, and then there is the D drive, which is temp file. Be careful not to store anything in temp file because it will be deleted by Microsoft. Okay, so I didn't select the disk. So we have attach, not new, attach existing. One good thing when you're working with the Azure through the browser is to have a big screen. So you see this, and whenever I click, it opens a new tab on the right side. We are testing, so in production you would do probably read-write, so that you have caching, that it's faster. So attaching the existing, successfully attached. Now you see before I did a refresh, nothing happened. So now if everything is okay, this is disk management locally, nothing changed. So disk management in the virtual machine, the disk is already here, so it's automatically. It's mounted under F. So now I'm in the full screen here. So we have this PC, F, as our file, and the latest changes are here. So you see how easy it was to add the disk. So one PowerShell command, nothing fancy. In the meantime, we got another virtual machine, Linux test. Let's see what will be the IP address. Open the PuTTY in the while we are waiting. So again, in my private address space, a new virtual machine. So you see, it's quite easy to add virtual machines, either Linux, either Windows. If you would add your own virtual machine, there is a documentation at the page I showed you. So the only things you have to be careful is that you do sysprep. So for Windows machine, you have to do the sysprep and follow the instruction there. So you do the sysprep, shutdown, upload the VHD, create a virtual machine inside this environment, and attach a disk, existing disk. Don't create a new disk in that case. So the last part, finishing part, will be just about the connectivity, a little bit about networking. So in the webinar which will follow this one, we will discuss about how we can connect now this our cloud private data center to our environment, so to our on-prem environment, and we get so-called hybrid cloud, so private cloud on our on-prem and the public cloud just for us in the Azure. So how can connect to this? So we have two possibilities. Either is to use the VPNs, so IPsec VPNs. The second one is to use the so-called express route, which is leased line through third-party suppliers. And you get the leased line between the Dublin data center or Amsterdam data center and your location. Of course, this is charged separately. You have to have the contract with the third-party supplier of the line. Traffic manager and load balancer are two other stuff which you get in the Azure. The idea of the traffic manager is that, for example, you have your websites or some kind of application which you want to distribute globally. So you create, let's say, virtual machines in the different data centers in the Azure, and the traffic manager then takes care that the American users are always connecting to the American data center, European users to Europe data centers, and so on, so that you get the low latency connectivity, so you always get the closest data center. The load balancer, as we already mentioned, is used for the high availability and the additional high availability is one of the stuff where you use the load balancer. So the idea of load balancer is that multiple resources are hidden behind and shown as one to the internet or to your users, so internally and to the internet. Okay, so that's for what we prepared for today. So thanks for listening, and hopefully it was useful for you. See you in the next Azure Under the Hood webinars, which we'll do again live. Thanks for today.